Hey, everybody. You are about to hear a brief retelling of the movie This Is What I Am. Enjoy the movie. Big K got his nickname because he was scrawny and a head taller than his peers. His head was too big for his body and his ears were too big for his head. If only the boy had been handsome, but alas, Stanley was not so lucky. Mr. Simon divided the students into pairs to work on the final project, and Andy Nickel would have to pair up with the Big K, which caused the rest of the boys to laugh. Bully Recky Brown splashed water on Stan's pants and started taunting him about peeing. After hearing from the twit, the boy turned around and hid around the corner. At the same time, another bully, Sam Nolan, was harassing Norman. Then a chocolate bar, Stan demanded, but this was a completely absurd demand. Norman's dad is a dentist and would never give him chocolate in his life. Puffy, in desperation, offered to eat his hand, but suffered the boy's fifth point instead. When Sam pulled down his underpants with all his might, the bully took the money and went to the cafeteria. Andy is convinced that Stan is only threatening and there's no need to be afraid of him. Norman is Big K's only friend. He asks Andy not to hurt him. The red-haired boy was hiding in the nerd's corner waiting for his pants to dry. The place was cursed. Once you set foot in there, you were a loser forever, but Andy had to risk his reputation and approach Simon. Big K realizes that the boy doesn't want to be his partner, so he suggests that he do all the work himself. He would let Andy write it off and not tell anyone about it, but the boy refused and they would do the project together. Andy's father was good with computers, but for some reason the instructions were not attached to his son, and sometimes it was difficult to find a common language. The man took the lawnmower away from Andy and showed him how to cut the grass properly. Andy complains to his mom that he has to go to the nerd's corner to study with Stanley. The boy wonders why God made such a mockery of Big K, gave him such an appearance that he is now being laughed at. Dan tells Andy that Mr. Simon managed to win a car thanks to a contest in the newspaper, where he had to write 25 words and use them to tell how to achieve world peace. Then Andy saw Mary Claire. The all-important 8th grade boys were already kissing her, and Andy wished she could be among them. If Mary was the prettiest girl in the school, Karen Connor was the ugliest, and she was even worse than the loser boys. Jason Friel bumped into Karen in the hallway, which is something you should never do. Jason is now screaming that he's going to die, and all the other boys are running away from him like he's a leper. Only Myron's Court knows how to help the little bully. He has to touch Karen again and tell her where the scare came from so she can go back, and it will have to be done in her territory of dumb nerds. Norman asked Stanley not to make it harder on himself and to bribe the bully somehow, but the guy thinks it's wrong. Suddenly a girl runs up and tells him that Jason caught Karen. He had her pinned against the wall and was beating her with his jacket, never forcing himself to touch her again. Simon easily lifted him up on his outstretched arms. Suddenly Simon yelled loudly no and lowered the bully to the ground. The guys can't understand why the red-haired giant allows the bullies to bully him when he can break them in half at any moment. But in Stan's opinion, there's no point. There will always be new bullies to take their place. Karen has locked herself in the bathroom stall and is crying sitting on the floor. Mr. Simon comes to comfort the girl who has cut her hands and face. He says that villains should not be seen in such a state. He will help her. Karen had to be sent to the doctor and Jason was suspended by Mr. Simon. He described on the blackboard the 4 words that made him win the car. Human dignity plus compassion equals peace, after the teacher said he didn't want to teach the class today and cried. Andy works part-time as a paperboy. He drove up to Mary's house and looked in the window, but was immediately discovered by her father. The boy tried to excuse himself and Mary came out. Andy was embarrassed and began to stammer. The man, of course, guessed what was wrong. On Fridays, Andy works part-time in the clerk's office and makes copies of various documents, so he found out that there will be a talent contest at school, and the most surprising thing is that Big K is going to sing at it. His friends now try to talk him out of it, but Stanley has the right to perform at the contest and he will use it. According to the cheeky guy, after that, all the nerds will be even worse off, but Karen supported the singer. The bullies do whatever they want anyway. Norman took offense to his friend and said some mean things to him. A girl came up to Candy and told him that Mary Claire liked him. She had already dated everyone, now it was his turn. The news is certainly happy, but it didn't sound as romantic as a 13-year-old boy would have liked. At the end of the month, the boy collected payment for the newspapers. He didn't feel comfortable taking money from Mary. But it was the first time they talked. And then Andy was ambushed. Ricky Brown wet a newspaper and knocked the kid off his bike with it, then took away the cookies that Mandy had been given by the neighbors. At school, Candy was approached by Modoc and asked if he still thought Mr. Simon was his favorite teacher. Because his dad says he's a homo. Andy didn't know what that word meant. This conversation was overheard by little Jason, and Andy is now trying to find out from his friends if Mr. Simon is a homo or not, whatever that means. Stanley suggests they choose the word tolerance for their literary project. The hero of their story dreams of a world where society allows people to be different. You don't have to like them, just leave them alone. Jason ran to his brother and almost got a peck on the face and asked if he could fire the teacher for being gay. Of course, Carl told him. His father again tells Andy that he's doing something wrong, this time assembling a model airplane incorrectly. The man chased the boy away and started to assemble the model instead of him. The boy decided to ask his mom about the girls. Mrs. Nickel gave the advice not to worry. In the 8th grade, it's not for long anyway, but it's important that he doesn't forget to use the deodorant she bought for him. That evening, with a sorrowful face, Jason told his mom that their teacher was gay, and she told her husband. Andy also learned the meaning of the word. Mr. Nickel doesn't want his son to be taught by someone like that, even if he is the best teacher in the whole school. Who knows how they get that way? In the morning, Mr. Simon started taking the kids for rides in his cool new car. Ricky is now constantly bullied by Dandy because of his friendship with Big K. Mary stood up for him. Mr. Friel goes to the principal and tells her that their teacher is a homosexual. Supposedly the whole school knows about it, and just because he was teacher of the year doesn't mean he isn't a pervert. He is sick, but the woman has known Mr. Simon for 12 years and he has always behaved decently. But then why hasn't he remarried since his wife died years ago, and he was probably just covering for her? Mr. Friel promised that if the teacher was dealt with within 2 days, he would go to the newspapers. Modak was not only a gossip, but a businessman. Andy wanted to give Mary a bracelet, but he didn't have the money. So the salesman demanded 3 baseball cards for the jewelry. The bracelet was worth no more than $10, and years later those cards were sold at auction for $100 grand. The principal decided to talk to Mr. Simon to get him to deny these vile rumors. He has been single and unmarried for so many years, and people are so fond of stirring up gossip. The man can't understand how his personal life relates to his professional life. Are his accomplishments not enough? Mr. Simon refused to stoop to this issue, especially when it was brought up by people like the Friel family. Soon the whole school knew that Andy and Mary would be dating. Bully Ricky Brown is pissed off because the girl dumped him a long time ago. The principal arrives to talk to the Friel family. Jason's mother says the kids look up to the teacher as a role model, and he drove them around in his car the other day. Except that they are afraid of the wrong thing. Their son recently beat up a girl because he thinks she is his homeland, which is normal for them. At the end of the conversation, Mr. Friel promised that the principal will get the same for covering for the perverted teacher. Andy's father is also concerned about the situation. He asks his son if Mr. Simon has done anything suspicious, such as touching boys or something like that. Andy is embarrassed by such questions. The principal is worried that Mr. Friel might ruin their reputation without any proof, and after all, she wants to send the kids to college. She convinces a colleague to say it's a lie. Mr. Simon sells his new car. It's too cool for him. He arrives at school with empty boxes and lies to Andy that he won't be working here next year, only because he's moving in with his sister. That's how Jason Fried's plan worked. Buddy Dan said he could have guessed it a long time ago if he remembered how excited the teacher was about ballet. Ricky came up to Candy and punched him in the stomach to let him know that he was against him going out with Mary. Stanley came around the corner and suggested that the bully just turn around and walk away without anyone knowing about it. Out of harm's way, Ricky decided to take the giant's advice. Andy had hoped to avoid trouble, but Mary had moved into the hovering phase, a technique where the female is constantly close to her prey, forcing the male to act and think that the initiative is in his hands. Andy began to sweat and act like an idiot, but Mary pretended not to notice. She reminded the boy that he wanted to ask her something. Mary twirled the bracelet in her hands, estimated its market value, and agreed to be Andy's girlfriend. All through gym class, Andy tried to sweat as little as possible, but it's hard to stop sweating when you think about how Ricky Brown is going to pound you. The boy heads to the bus stop where he's going to meet Mary. Ben decides that his friend has lost his mind, and so Ricky appears in front of Andy. However, Mary began to blackmail the bully. Because he stole $32 from the cafeteria, she will tell everything. Ricky backed down. But only Mary, our hero, was afraid no less, because he went into the tunnel of kisses, and he never did it. Alas, there was no time left for a kiss. The girls' bus was already leaving. Talent night had begun. Andy walked up to Stanley and apologized for not standing up for him when the bully sprayed his pants. He thinks Stan is the bravest kid in school. The giant is worried that his friend Norman never showed up. Andy decides to look for Norman. He's at home and admits that he just doesn't want to see the bullies' faces and hear their laughter. When Stanley's embarrassed. But who better than his best friend to support him at a time like this, Andy asked and drove back to school. Norman came over to wish Stan luck after all. One performance by not the most talented kids was worse than the other. But then a dark-skinned kid came on stage and gave a killer drum solo that rocked the room. Trouble is, he was performing right in front of Stanley, and now he was going to get more. The tall and proud guy showed up in front of the crowd. Ricky had already prepared a tomato, but Andy came up to him and threatened that the bully would be sorry if he did it. Ricky didn't listen to him and received a powerful kick between the legs. Mr. Simons mockingly suggested that Ricky had eaten too many tomatoes and had a stomach ache. He asked him to take the bully out and continue the show. Stanley finally got a cappella, and he's pretty good at it. Stan sang with joy and inspiration, and the audience applauded him after the performance. Now it was time for the first kiss. Mary was waiting for Andy at the bus stop. The guy asked for permission and leaned forward, but at the last moment he chickened out and pecked Mary on the cheek. The girl realized that Andy was inexperienced and showed him how to do it. Mary had a stopwatch in her pocket and used it to time how long the boys kissed. Mr. Simon gave the last lesson and wished all the students good luck. Andy dated Mary for 5 weeks, and it was her longest relationship. The friends received an A+ grade for their work. The teacher is very proud of them. The children arranged a farewell surprise for Mr. Simon. They filled the interior of his car with flowers and wrote that he is the best teacher. The principal also saw her friend off, but Andy had one question and came to Mr. Simon's house. The teacher understood everything and told him about his wife. Today is the 19th anniversary of her death. He must have loved her too much. Mr. Simon admonished the student and walked him out. His father wanted to take the lawnmower away from Andy again, but the boy insisted that he finish the job himself. He would do it well, but in his own way, and Mr. Nickel realized that his son had developed character.